Hello and welcome to the Matthias iOS Development Show with me, Matthias, your iOS developer. And today we're going to look at subscripting a string. Now, what does that mean? If you have a string, say it says hello playground here, and you want a certain character from this string, what you can do in pretty much every programming language, including Swift, but we're getting there, is that you can just say a string, open square bracket, put in an index, and then close the square bracket again, and you should be getting that character. But Swift is a bit different in this regard. It's a bit complicated. We already see the error here. It says Subscript is unavailable. Use a string index instead. So we cannot use an int, we got to use a string index. And what this basically means is if we want to have a subscript of a string, as in we want to have just a certain character from here, we cannot put in an integer, we got to put in a string index, right? And if you look at here, we can already see a string. And we already get a bunch of indexes here. So we can call the end index, for example, and then, oh, this would work as giving us the last element in the string. And we can actually look at the position, look at the declaration, look at the documentation here, what it says. We also have the start index. Do we have the start index? Yeah, we have the start index. And this makes it a bit annoying to deal with. So what I've built, let's just comment this out. What you can also do instead is you can just make this into an extension. So this is what we do. You're going to type extension string. And then we're going to make a function and we're calling this subscript. And we're giving in an index, which is an integer as a parameter, and this entire thing returns a string. And I'm just going to return an empty string here for now so that the compiler doesn't complain about it. And what we want to then do is self square brackets. And this in this case is our string that we're accessing. And we can already say, for example, self start index, which would give us the first character in here. But what we want to do is we want to have the thing where we can enter just an integer and get any index out of here. So what we're doing is we're not calling start index, we're saying index. And this is the self.start index. And then we're going to say offset by our custom index, which we've just added. Cool, cool. So, and what of course then we want this to be returned. And then we're also gonna parse this into a string, because when I want to access a subcharacter inside a string, I usually want to have this as a string already. Like I don't want to have this as a substring, or I don't want to have this as a character. I want to have the single character as a string. So now when we say, oh, there we go, a string index 4, this should give us the character. Hey, at the 4th place, it's the O. Isn't this neat? Now this is not fine. We gotta actually extend this a bit, because this will only work if the index is actually in bounds, and of course if the string exists. So we gotta extend this function a bit. So I'm gonna say, for example, if self is empty, then I'm going to return an empty string, and only otherwise else. Only otherwise we're going to do the regular call to our string. If you want to do this differently, if you want to throw an error, if you want to return a nil, for example, that's also a possibility. I like to avoid dealing that and just give us an empty string ultimately. And this will balance this for, okay, do we call this on an empty string? So if we say empty string index 5, index 5 doesn't exist on an empty string, what will we get? Hey, we get an empty string back. Cool. And another issue, of course, is if the index is out of bounds. So say I'm just going to add this to this. Oh. There we go. So if we're going to say index is higher than self count. So now we also check in, okay, is the string empty at all? Empty, or does it exist? If it's empty, return an empty string. If it exists, give us the actual character at the specified index. If the index is out of bounds, if the index is bigger than the string is long, So we're going to say a string, and we're going to call 99th index. This usually shouldn't happen. Then I also want to have an empty character returned. Of course, you can also adapt this. Hey, it works. You can also adapt this. You can say, hey, return as a nil, for example. And the same way, since we're already dealing with this, we can just also harden this in the different direction. If we're going to say index is smaller than 0, which of course should never happen. Should never have an index that's negative 0. That's negative to 0. Or you might in your very special implementation of your code. So that we call a string. Now, with a negative index, we will get also an empty string back. And this is our nice subscripting function. So if you add this to your project, you can just get any character from any index in your string, and it's also hardened and safetied and made safe against empty strings, against indices that are bigger than the actual count available, and indices that are negative to 0. I think this is pretty neat, and I'm using this in pretty much all of my projects. And that's it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That would be really neat. Also follow me on Twitter on Matthias_code, and I'll see you next time.